Hey guys, it's reading day, and today's book is Bram Stoker's Dracula. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? Happy Sunday. Sorry I'm running a little late today. Actually, I'm trying to go early today because the California Capitol Air show, I get some photos of some planes. I always have fun doing that, whether I do it from a location close to the field or from my house, because you can see them pretty good as well as they do fly past. Anyway, my name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you have a paranormal need or you think you have a paranormal need, we can get to you. It may take us a couple days because, like I said, California is a huge state. But in that event, we do have psychics on staff who will call you and talk to you about what may or may not be going on in the situation. And if it is paranormal, they can simmer the energy down until we can get out there. And usually it doesn't take more than 2 or 3 days for us to get out on location. Like I said, if you're watching from Facebook, and a lot of you are, and you haven't done so already, please feel free to hit that follow button. You know, we're always looking for followers. And chat in the chat room. I can see you chat today. You know, I'll even answer today. So you can chat amongst yourselves in the chat room. And show me some love. You know, if you like what you hear and see today, give me a thumbs up. Give me those weird happy heart things or a smiley face. Because what that does is that puts us up higher in Facebook's FYP. The computer sees that. And so they think that there's a lot of interaction. It thinks there's a lot of interaction going on, you know, with the FYP. That's the For You page. If you have noticed when you're on Facebook, you start scrolling down, and first you hit the reels, and then you hit the suggested things down there. You know, where it'll just friends for you or suggest certain pages based on your interests. That's the For You page. So that's where FYP kicks in. So if enough people like this show and you know, participate with me in this show, this will pop up on their FYP page. Okay? First as my dad would say, suggest me. So yeah, feel free to do that. Chat amongst yourselves. It works that way all the way across the boards for all of the social media. Now, if you're watching from YouTube, and a lot of you are or will be later on, please again leave me thumbs up. Show me some love. You know, I've got over 1,000 videos over at YouTube, and they're all of this show, and they're all different topics, from cryptids all the way into murder mysteries and things like that. You know, I'm a journalist, photojournalist, so I like to change it up a lot. So, you know, like tomorrow, for instance, our guest is going to be is a prosecutor who was able to win a case without a body. She was able to actually convict someone without having a body for evidence. So it's going to be an interesting show tomorrow. Anyway, so if you're watching from YouTube, you know, give me a thumbs up, happy face, all that stuff. Share it across, comment, same old, right? Just like with Twitch. It works the same way. And just the only one that works different is TikTok. If we're not on TikTok today, but if we were on TikTok today, I would be asking people to double tap the screen, because that's how you send likes through TikTok. You have to double tap that screen. Okay, that all being said, I'm going to be reading for about an hour today. Every Sunday I read from a paranormal themed book, whether it's a fantasy story or something like that. And we have been reading Bram Stoker's Dracula. We're in day 4 of that, which puts me, I think, in chapter 6, 5 or 6. But it's been an interesting read. It's a really, compared to what I've been reading, you know, in the past few months. But you know, if you guys are interested in any of these books, even the ones, because you got to remember, a lot of the books I have that I'm reading from, the latest date I can do it without getting copyright claimed on them is 1944. So these books range from like 1600 to 1944. It's over at Gutenberg. It's the Gutenberg project. thousands of books over there. People have taken and painstakingly translated and redone them in the ebooks. And that's what makes it so cool. And they're free. So, I mean, you don't have to worry about, like, if you're doing a show like mine, you don't have to worry about copyrights or anything like that. So, I've been pulling a lot of stuff from there, and I've never read this book physically. This is the first time I'm reading this book physically. I'm loving it. I'm really loving it. Also, I'm going to remind everybody on the ticker. It's that time of the month, and I've got to get some bills paid. Well, I've got to get the bills paid, keep the show on the air. And you can see on the ticker we're $160 short of our goal this month. So I'm not, nobody's required, but if you find it in your heart, that would be great. Send to the PayPal or send to the Venmo. I'd really appreciate it. You're not required to. You're not required to pay to watch the show or nothing. The other announcement I'm going to make is I will be getting the Patreon page up and running. We're going to have 3 levels of membership. The first level is a basic membership. It's going to be 18.3 cents a day per month. And what that gets you is, well, I'm going to be laying that out probably tomorrow, as it comes up, because I'm still putting together the 2 upper levels for the membership. But, we were talking about Meetup and how, they've completely got, come next January, I probably will not be on Meetup any longer. So the only way to do this would be either to charge, subscriptions over at Meetup, or just start moving stuff, in events and stuff over to the Patreon. A lot of groups or a lot of shows that can't qualify for monetary stuff on YouTube end up utilizing Patreon for that particular reason, and we got turned down at YouTube twice. So, yeah, so that's why I'm kind of leaning more over to the Patreon. We'll talk more about that in the coming days, as we start putting that together. Anyway, so today, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and my throat's kind of weird. My 18-year-old or my 20-year-old dog is sick today, so I'm trying to nurse him. I was, hoping to maybe go out to the airfield today. We'll see how it goes the next 2 or 3 hours, because he's just not feeling well today, and it's unfortunate, very unfortunate. Anyway, so here we go. Let me read this, and in fact, he's in here with me right now. He's sleeping because I have the air conditioning on, so I brought him in with me because it's 92 degrees outside, which means it's about 100 something in this house. So he's in here with me. So if you hear a squeal or you hear a weird noise or something falls over in here, that's him moving around. But right now he's sleeping. So yeah, hopefully his stomach settles and I can escape and go out to the air, go camp out by the airfield and get some real nice close-up shots. But otherwise, I'll be shooting from my front yard the way it's looking right now. But I do that occasionally anyway. Okay, so Bram Stoker's Dracula. We are in chapter VI, which I think is chapter 5. I'm not a Roman numeral person, so hopefully, So far, we've been over Dracula's castle, and now everything's like turning to go to London and England and all that, where Dracula, was buying a house there. We met Renfield, and all that's going on, and now we're reading the journals. Like we were reading Mr. Hawkins' journal, from Transylvania, and now we're reading Mina Murray's journal. And if you're not familiar with the story, that is Hawkins' girlfriend. So over in England. So this is where we're at, and okay, so we're reading. I'll read for about an hour, and it depends too. I may go more, or I may go less, because it depends how long the chapters are and how quickly we get through them. Because usually we get in about 2 chapters every Sunday, and that's about what we can squeeze in. So, excuse me. So yeah, that's what that's what happens. So I mean, if I get to the point where it's 153 right now, if I get to the point where it's 253 and I'm still midway through the second chapter, we're just going to continue on with that. You okay, baby boy? Yeah, he's turning around. So hopefully the air conditioner does him some good. But he hasn't felt good. He hasn't felt good for the last 20, 30 minutes. So I'm just keeping an eye on him. Okay, Nina Murray's Journal, Chapter 5. Yeah. 24 July, Whitby. Lucy met me at the station, looking sweeter and lovelier than ever, and we drove up to the house at the Crescent in which they have rooms. This is a lovely place. The little river, the Esk, runs through a deep valley, which broadens out as it comes near the harbor. A great viaduct runs across, with high piers, through which the view seems somehow further away than it really is. The valley is beautifully green, and it is so steep that when you are on when you are on the highland on either side, you look right across it, unless you are near enough to see down. The houses of the old town, the side away from us, are all red roofed and seem piled up on one another, on one over the other, anyhow, like the pictures we see of Nuremberg. Right over the town is the ruin of Whitby Abbey, which was sacked by the Danes, and which is the scene, a part of Marmion, where the grille was built up in the wall. It is a most noble ruin of immense size and full of beautiful and romantic bits. There is a legend that a white lady is seen in one of the windows. Between it and the town there is another church, the parish one, brown, which is in a big graveyard, all full of tombstones. Let me make this clear too, Alan, I'm starting, is that these books, like I said, are written up until 1944. This one in particular was written in the late 1800s. Okay? So remember that, 1800s, early 1900s, remember that, we get this woke stuff going on with certain phrases and stuff. I'm going to try and work around these phrases if there's anything in there like that. But sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't catch them in time when I'm reading. So if something sounds offensive, do not turn me into the internet police or anything like that. It's just the times in the book. It's the timing on when these things were written. Okay, so I'll just let you know. All right. Okay. This is to my mind the nicest spot in Whitby, for it lies right over the town, and has a full view of the harbor and all up the bay to where the headland called Kettleness stretches out onto the sea. It descends so steeply over the harbor that part of the bank has fallen away, and some of the graves have been destroyed. In one place, part of the stonework of the grave stretches out over the sandy pathway far below. There are walks with seats beside them through the churchyard, and people go and sit there all day long looking at the beautiful view and enjoying the breeze. I shall come and sit here very often myself and work. Indeed, I am writing now, with my book on my knee and listening to the talk of three old men who are sitting beside me. They seem to do nothing all day but sit up here and talk. The harbor lies below me, with, on the far side, one long granite wall stretching out into the sea, with a curve outwards at the end of it, in the middle of which is a lighthouse. A heavy sea-wall runs along the outside of it. On the near side, the sea-wall makes an elbow crooked inversely, and its end too has a lighthouse. Between the two piers there's a narrow opening into the harbor, which it is nice at high water, but when the tide is out, it shoals away to nothing, and there is merely the stream of the the banks of sand, with rocks here and there. Outside the harbor, on this side, there rises for about half a mile a great reef, the sharp edge of which runs straight out from behind the south lighthouse. At the end of it is a buoy with a bell, which swings in bad weather and sends in a mournful sound the wind. They have a legend here that when a ship is lost, bells are heard out at sea. I must ask the old man about this. He is coming this way. He's a funny old man. He must be awfully old. Let me switch this around for his face is all gnarled. Let me make an adjustment here with the mic. So I can get this thing. I just want to make sure because I do have the air conditioner on and I want to make sure that you guys can hear me. Not super loud, but hear me. Okay. He is a funny old man. He must be awfully old, for his face is all gnarled and twisted like the bark of a tree. He tells me that he is nearly 100, and that he was a sailor in the Greenland fishing fleet when Waterloo was fought. He is, I'm afraid, a very skeptical person, for when I asked him about the bells at sea and the White Lady of the Abbey, he said very brusquely, "I wouldn't fash, Maisel, about them, miss. Things be all wore out. Mind, I don't say that they never was, but I do say that they wasn't in my time. They be all very well for comers and trippers, not for a nice young lady like you. Them feet folks from York and Leeds, that be always eating cured herrings and drinking tea and looking out to buy cheap jet would creed aught. I wonder, Maisel, who'd be bothered telling lies to them, even the newspapers, which is full of fool talk. I thought he would be a good person to learn interesting things from, so I asked him if he would mind telling me something about the whale fishing in the old days. He was just settling himself to begin when the clock struck 6, whereupon he labored to get up and said, "I must gang words home now, miss. My granddaughter doesn't like to be kept waiting when the tea is ready, for it takes me to crammel a boon degrees, for there be a many of them, and this, I lack belly by the clock. He hobbled away, and I could see him hurrying, as well as he could, down the steps. The steps are a great feature of the place. They lead from the town up to the church. There are hundreds of them. I do not know how many, and they wind up in a delicate curve. The slope is so gentle that a horse could easily walk up and down them. I think they must originally have had something to do with the abbey. I shall go home too. Lucy went out visiting with her mother, and as they were only duty calls, I did not go. They will be home by now. 1 August. I came up here an hour ago with Lucy, and we had a most interesting talk with my old friend and the two others who always come and join him. He is evidently the Sir Oracle of them, and I should think must have been in his time a most dictatorial person. He will not admit anything, and down faces everybody. If he can't, out argues them, and then takes their silence for agreement with his views. Lucy was looking sweetly pretty in her white lawn frock. She has got a beautiful color since she has been here. I noticed that the old men did not lose any time in coming up and sitting near her when we sat down. She is so sweet. I think they all fell in love with her on the spot. Even my old man succumbed and did not contradict her, but gave me double share instead. I got him on the subject of the legends, and he went off at once into a sort of sermon. I must try to remember it and put it down. It be old fool talk, lock, stock, and barrel. That's what it be, and now else. These bands and wafts and bogosen, barguess and boggles, and all the net them is only fit to set bairns and dizzy women in Belderin. They be now but airblibs. They, and old grims and signs and woundings, be all invented by parsons and ill-some bodies and railway touters to steer and scunner halflands and I'm just going and to get folks to do something that they don't other inclined to. It makes me ireful to think of them. Why? It's them that, not content with printing lies on paper and preaching them out the pulpits, does want to be cutting them on the tombstones. Look here all around you, and what art you will. All of them steens holding up their heads as well as they can out of their pride, as they can't, simply tumbling down with the weight or the lies wrote on them. Here lies the body, or sacred to the memory, wrote on all of them, and yet, in nigh half of them, there been no bodies at all, and the memories of them had carried a pinch of stuff about, much less sacred. Lies, all of them. Nothing but lies of one kind or another. My God. But it'll be a queer scouterment at the day of judgment in their death sarks, all juped together and trying to drag their tombstones with them to prove how good they was. Some of them trembling and dithering with their hands that dawsoned and slippy from lying that they can't even keep their grip on them. I could see from the old fellow's self-satisfied air and the way in which he looked round for the approval of his cronies that he was showing off. So I put in a word to keep him going. Oh, Mr. Swales, you can't be serious. Surely these tombstones are not all wrong. Yablins. There may be a poorish few not wrong, saving where they make out the people too good. For there be folk that be like the sea, if only it be their own. The whole thing be only lies. Now you look here. You come here a stranger, and you see this Kirkarth. I nodded, for I thought it better to assent, though I did not quite understand his dialect. I knew it had something to do with the church. He went on, and you can see that all these steens be a boon folk that be happed here. Snodden and Snog? I assented again. Then that be just where the light comes in. Why? There be scores of these lay beds that be tomb as old as Dunn's baka box on Friday night. He nudged one of his companions, and they all laughed. And my God, how could they be otherwise? Look at that one. He had fessed to bite the beer bank. Read it. I went over and read. Edward Spenslow, Master Mariner, murdered by pirates off the coast of Andes, April 1854, 8:30. When I came back, Mr. Swales went on. Who brought him home? I wonder, to have him here. Murdered off the coast of Andes, and you conceded his body lay under. Why, I can name ye a dozen whose bones lie in that Greenland seas above. He pointed northwards, or where the currents may have drifted them. There be there be. You can, with your young eyes, read the small print of the lies from here. This Braithwaite Lowry, I knew his father, off Greenland in 20, or Andrew Woodhouse, drowned in the same seas in 1777, or John Paxton, drowned off Cape Farewell a year later, or old John Rawlings, whose grandfather sailed with me, drowned in the Gulf of Finland in '50. Do you think that all these men will have to make a rush to Whitby when the trumpet sounds? I have me antherums about it. I tell you that when they get here, they be jommelin' and jostlin' one another that way. It be ood like a fight up on the ice in the old days, when we'd be at another from daylight to dark, and trying to tie up our cuts by the light of the aurora borealis. This was evidently local pleasantry, for the old man cackled over it, and his cronies joined in with gusto. But, I said, surely you are not quite correct, for you start on the assumption that all the poor people or their spirits will have to take their tombstones with them on the day of judgment. Do you think that will really be necessary? Well, what else be they tombstones for? Answer me that, miss. To please their relatives, I suppose. To please their relatives, you suppose. This, he said, with intense scorn. How will it please their relatives to know that lies is wrote over them, and that everybody in the place knows that they be lies? He pointed to a stone at our feet, which had been laid down as a slab, on which the seat was rested, close to the edge of the cliff. Read the lies on that one, he said. The letters were upside down to me from where I sat, but Lucy was more opposite to them. So she leaned over and read. Sacred to the memory of George Cannon, who died, in the hope of a glorious resurrection on July 29, 1873, falling from the rocks at Kettleness. This tomb was erected by his sorrowing mother to her dearly beloved son. He was the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Really, Mr. Swales, I don't see anything very funny in that. She spoke her comment very gravely and somewhat severely. You don't see aught funny? Ha ha! But that's because ye don't gum sorry mother was that the sorry mother was a hellcat that hated him because he was a crude, a regular lamenter he was, and he hated her so that he committed suicide. Okay, see, this is where I'm trying to keep this cleaned up and rolling. Okay, he hated her so that he committed to unalive himself in order that she might get an insurance she put in on his life. He blew nigh to the top of his... Oh, boy. Okay, so here we... Alright, guys. This is what I'm talking about. He blew nigh... He shot himself in the head. We'll just say that. With an old musket that they had for scaring the crows with. 'Tweren't for crows, then. For it brought the clegs and doups to him. That's the way he fell off the rocks. And, as to hopes of a glorious resurrection, I've often heard him say, Maisel, that he hoped to go to hell. For his mother was so pious that she'd be sure to go to heaven, and he didn't want to addle where she was. Now, isn't that seen enough at any rate? He hammered it with his stick as he spoke. A pack of lies? And won't it make Gabriel kickle when Geordie comes panting up the grease with the tube steam balanced on his hump, and asked it to be took as evidence? I did not know what to say. But Lucy turned to, Oh, why didn't you tell us of this? It is my favorite seed, and I cannot leave it. And now I find I must go on sitting over the grave of a self-unaliver. That won't harm ye, my pretty, and it may make poor Geordie Gladstone to have so trim as a lass sitting on his lap. That won't hurt ye. Why, I've sat here off and on For nigh 20 years past, and it hasn't done me no harm. Don't ye fash about them, as lies under ye, or that doesn't lie under there either. It'll be time for ye to be getting a start when you see the tombstone run away with, and the place as bare as a stubble field. There's the clock, and I must gang. My service to ye, ladies, and off he hobbled. Lucy and I sat a while, and it was all so beautiful before us that we took hands as we sat. And she told me all over again about Arthur and their coming marriage. That made me just a little heartsick, for I haven't heard from Jonathan for a whole month. That same day, I came up here alone, for I'm very sad. There was no letter for me. I hope there cannot be anything the matter with Jonathan. The clock has just struck 9. I see the lights scattered all over the town, sometimes in rows where the streets are, and sometimes singly. They run right up to the Esk, and die away in the curve of the valley. To my left, the view is cut off by a black line of roof of the old house next to the abbey. The sheep and lambs are bleating in the fields away behind me, and there is a clatter of a donkey's hooves up the paved road below. The band on the pier is playing a harsh waltz in good time, and further along the quay there is a Salvation Army meeting in the back street. Neither of the bands hears the other, but up here I hear and see them both. I wonder where Jonathan is, and if he's thinking of me. I wish he were here. Grab some water. Hello, everybody. I see my sister's in the chat room. Reese's in the chat room. We got someone else from Twitch in the chat room. Welcome, 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 everybody. Let me have a little drink of water. It's dry, too. Okay. Dr. Seabird's diary. 5 June. The case of Renfield grows more interesting the more I get to understand the man. See? Told you about Renfield. He has certain qualities very largely developed: selfishness, secrecy, and purpose. I wish I could get at what is the object of the latter. He seems to have some settled scheme of his own, but what it is I do not yet know. His ridiculous is a love of animals, though indeed he has such curious turns in it that I sometimes imagine he is only abnormally cruel. His pets are of the odd. Just now his hobby is catching flies. He has at present such a quantity that I have had myself to expostulate. To my astonishment, he did not break out in a fury, as I expected, but took the matter in simple seriousness. He thought for a moment and then said, "May I have 3 days? I shall clear them away." "Of course," I said, "that would do. I must watch him." 18 June. He has turned his mind now to spiders, and has got several very big fellows in a box. He keeps feeding them with his flies, and the number of the latter is becoming sensibly diminished, although he has used half his food in attracting more flies from outside his room. 1 July. His spiders are now becoming as great a nuisance as his flies, and today I told him that he must get rid of them. He looked very sad at this, so I said that he must clear out some of them, at all events. He cheerfully acquiesced in this, and I gave him the same time as before for reduction. He disgusted me much much while with him. For when a horrid blowfly bloated with some carrion food buzzed into the room, he caught it, held it exultantly for a few moments between his finger and thumb, and, before I knew what he was going to do, put it in his mouth and ate it. I scolded him for it, but he argued quietly that it was very good and very wholesome, which is true. That it was life, strong life, and gave life to him, protein. This gave me an idea, or the rudiment of one. I must watch how he gets rid of his spiders. He has evidently some deep problem in his mind, for he keeps a little notebook, in which he is always jotting down something. Whole pages of it are filled with masses of figures, generally single numbers, added up in batches. And then the totals added in batches again, as though he were focusing some account, as the auditors put it. 8 July. There is a method in his madness, and the rudimentary idea in my mind is growing. It will be a whole idea soon, and then, oh, unconscious celebration. You will have to give the wall to your conscious brother. I kept away from my friend for a few days, so that I might notice if there were any change. Things remain as they were, except that he has parted with some of his pets and got a new one. He has managed to get a sparrow, and has already partially tamed it. His means of taming is simple, for already the spiders have diminished. Those that do remain, however, are well fed, for he still brings in the flies by, by tempting them with his food. 19 July. We are progressing. My friend is now a whole colony of sparrows, and his flies and spiders are almost gone. When I came in, he ran to me and said he wanted to ask me a great favor, a very, very great favor. And as he spoke, he fawned on me like a dog. I asked him what it was, and he said, with a sort of rapture in his voice and bearing, a kitten, a nice little, sleek, playful kitten, that I can play with and teach and feed and feed and feed. I was not unprepared for this, for I had noticed how his pets went on increasing in size and vivacity. But I did not care that his pretty family of tame sparrows wiped out in the same manner as the flies and the spiders. So I said I would see about it, and asked him if he would not rather have a cat than a kitten. His eagerness betrayed him as he answered, "Yes, I would like a cat. I only asked for a kitten lest you should refuse me a cat. No one would refuse me a kitten, would they?" I shook my head, and said that at present I feared it would not be possible, but that I would see about it. His face fell, and I could see a warning of danger in it, for there was a sudden fierce, sidelong look which meant killing. The man is an underdeveloped homicidal maniac. I shall test him with his present craving and see how it will work out. Then I shall know more. 10 p.m. I have witnessed him again and found him sitting in a corner brooding. When I came in, he threw himself on his knees before me and implored me to let him have a cat, that his salvation depended upon it. I was firm, however, and told him that he could not have it. Whereupon he went without a word, and sat down, gnawing his fingers, in the corner where I had found him. I shall see him in the morning early. 20 July. Visited Renfield very early, before the attendant went on his rounds. Found him up and humming a tune. He was spreading out his sugar, which he had saved in the window, and was manifestly beginning his fly-catching again, and beginning it cheerfully, and with a good grace. I looked around for his birds, and not seeing them, asked him where they were. He replied, without turning round, that they had all flown away. There were a few feathers about the room, and on his pillow a drop of blood. I said nothing, but went and told the keeper to report to me if there were anything odd about him during the day. 11 a.m. The attendant has just been to me to say that Renfield has been very sick, and has disgorged a whole lot of feathers. My belief is, doctor, he said, that he has eaten his birds, and that he just took and ate them raw. 11 p.m. I gave Renfield a strong opiate tonight, enough to make even him sleep, and took away his pocketbook to look at it. The thought that has been buzzing around my brain lately is complete, and the theory proved. My homicidal maniac is a peculiar kind. I shall have to invent a new classification for him, and call him, here we go, a life-eating maniac. I'm not even going to try the word. Zoophagius, I think is the word. Life-eating maniac. What he desires is to absorb as many lives as he can, and he has laid himself out to achieve it in a gathering type of way. He gave many flies to one spider, and many spiders to one bird, and then wanted a cat to eat the many birds. What would have been his later steps? It would almost be worthwhile to complete the experiment. It might be done if there was only a sufficient cause. Men sneered at vivisection, and yet look at its results today. Why not advance science in its most difficult and vital aspect, the knowledge of the brain? Had I even the secret of such mind, of one such mind, did I hold the key to the fancy one, even one lunatic? I might advance my own branch of science to a pitch compared with the Burton Sanderson's physiology or Ferrier's brain knowledge would be as nothing. If only there were a sufficient cause. I must not think too much of this, or I may be tempted. A good cause might turn the scale with me, for may not I too be an exceptional brain? How well the man reasoned. Lunatics always do within their own scope. I wonder at how many lives he values a man, or if at one only. He has closed the account most accurately, and today began a new record. How many of us begin a new record with each day of our lives? To me, it seems only yesterday that my whole life ended with my new hope, and that truly I began a new record. So it will be until the great recorder sums me up and closes my ledger account with a balance to profit or loss. Oh, Lucy, Lucy, I cannot be angry with you, nor can I be angry with my friend whose happiness is yours, but I must only wait on hopeless and work. Work, work, work. If I only could have as strong a cause as my poor mad friend there, a good unselfish cause to make me work, that would indeed be happiness. Mina Murray's Journal, 26 July. I'm anxious, and if it soothes me to express myself here, it is like whispering to oneself and listening at the same time. And there is also something about the shorthand symbols that makes it different from writing. I am unhappy about Lucy and about Jonathan. I had not heard from Jonathan for some time, and was very concerned. But yesterday, dear Mr. Hawkins, who was always so kind, sent me a letter from him. I had written asking him if he had heard, and he said the enclosed had just been received. It is only a line dated from Castle Dracula, and says that he is just starting for home. That's not like Jonathan. I don't understand it, and it makes me uneasy. Then, too, Lucy, although she is so well, has lately taken to her old habit of walking in her sleep. Her mother has spoken to me about it, and we have decided that I lock the door of our room every night. Mrs. Westerner has got an idea that sleepwalkers always go out on roofs of houses and along the edges of cliffs, and then get suddenly weakened and fall over with a despairing cry that echoes over tear. She's naturally anxious about Lucy, and she tells me that her husband, Lucy's father, had the same habit, that he would get up in the night and dress himself and go out, if he were not stopped. Lucy is to be married in the autumn, and she is already planning out her dresses and how her house is to be arranged. I sympathize with her, for I do the same. Only Jonathan and I will start in life in a very simple way, and shall have to try to make both ends meet. Mr. Holmwood, he is the Honourable Arthur Holmwood, only son of Lord Godalming, is here very shortly, as soon as he can leave town, for his father is not very well, and I think dear Lucy is counting the moments till he comes. She wants to take him up to the seat of the churchyard cliff and show him the beauty of Whitby. I dare say it is the waiting which disturbs her. She will be all right when he arrives. 27 July. No news from Jonathan. I'm getting quite uneasy about him. Though why I should, I don't know. But I do wish that he would write, if it were only a single line. Lucy walks more than ever, and each night I'm awakened by her moving about the room. Fortunately, the weather is so hot that she cannot get cold. But still the anxiety and the perpetually being wakened is beginning to tell on me, and I'm getting nervous and wakeful myself. Thank God, Lucy's health keeps up. Mr. Holmwood has been suddenly called to the ring to see his father, who has been taken seriously ill. Lucy frets at the postponement of seeing him, but it does not touch her looks. She is a trifle stouter, and her cheeks are a lovely rose pink. She has lost that anemic look which she had. I pray it will last. 3 August. Another week gone and no news from Jonathan. Not even Miss from whom I have heard. Oh, I do hope he is not ill. He surely would have written. I look at the last letter of his, but somehow it does not satisfy me. It does not read like him, and yet it is his writing. There is no mistake of that. Lucy has not walked much in her sleep last week, but there is an odd concentration about her, which I don't understand. Even in her sleep she seems to be watching me. She tries the door, and finding it locked, goes about the room searching for the key. 6 August. Another 3 days and no news. This suspense is getting dreadful. If I only knew where to write, or where to go to, I should feel easier. But no one has heard a word of Jonathan since the last letter. I must only pray to God for patience. Lucy is more excitable than ever, but is otherwise well. Last night was very threatening, and the fishermen say that we are in for a storm. I must try to watch it and learn the weather signs. Today is a gray day, and the sun, as I write, is hidden in thick clouds, high over Kettleness. Everything is gray except the green grass, which seems like emerald amongst it. Gray earthly rock, gray clouds, tinged with the sunburst at the far edge, hang over the gray sea, into which the sand points stretch like gray fingers. The sea is tumbling in over the shallows, and the sandy flats with a roar, muffled in the sea mist drifting inland. The horizon is lost in a gray mist. All is vastness. The clouds are piled up high like giant rocks, and there's a brool over the sea that sounds like some presage of doom. Dark figures are on the beach here, sometimes half shrouded in the mist, and seem men like trees walking. The fishing boats are racing for home, and rise and dip in the groundswell as they sweep into the harbor, bending to the scuppers. Here comes old Mr. Swales. He's making straight for me by the way he lifts his hat that he wants to talk. I've been quite touched by the change in the poor old man. When he sat down beside me, he said in a very gentle way, "I want to say something to you, miss." I could see he was not at ease, so I took his poor old wrinkled hand in mine and asked him to speak fully. So he said, leaving his hand in mine, "I'm afraid, my dearie, that I must have shocked you by all the wicked things I've been saying about the dead and such like weeks past. But I didn't mean them, and I want you to remember that when I'm gone, you old folks, that be daffy, and with one foot about the crock hole, don't altogether like to think of it, and we don't want to feel scarred of it, and that's why I took to making light of it, so that I'd cheer up my own heart a little bit. But Lord love you, miss, I ain't afraid of dying, not a bit, only I don't want to die if I can help it. My time must be nigh at hand now, for I be odd, and 100 years is too much for any man to expect. And I'm so nigh it that the odd man is already wetting his scythe. You see, I can't get out of the habit of caffing about it all at once. The chaps will wag as they be used to. Some day soon the angel of death will sound his trumpet for me. But don't ye dole and grate with my dreary, for he saw that I was crying. If he should come this very night, I'd not refuse and answer his call. For life be, after all, only a waiting for something else than what we're doing, and death be all that we can rightly depend on. But I'm content, for it's coming to me, my dearie, and coming quick. It may be coming while we be looking and wondering. Maybe it's in that wind out over the sea that's bringing it with loss and wreck and sore distress and sad hearts. Look, look, he cried suddenly. There's something in that wind, and the host beyond that sounds and looks and tastes and smells like death. It's in the air. I feel it coming. Lord, make me answer cheerful when my call comes. He held up his arms devoutly and raised his hat. His mouth moved as though he were praying. After a few minutes' silence, he got up, shook hands with me, and blessed me, and said goodbye, and hobbled off. It all touched me and upset me very much. I was glad when the Coast Guard came along, with his spyglass under his arm. He stopped to talk with me, as he always does, but all the time kept looking at his strange ship. I can't make her out, he said. She's a Russian, by the look of her. But she's knocking about in the queerest way. She doesn't know her mind a bit. She seems to see the storm coming, but can't decide whether to run up north in the open or put in here. Look there again. She has steered very strangely, for she doesn't mind the hand on the wheel. Changes about with every puff of wind. We'll hear more of her before this time tomorrow. Chapter 7. Chapter VII. Like I said, I'm not in a posted in Mina Marie's journal from a correspondent in Whitby. One of the greatest and suddenest storms on record has just been experienced here, with results both strange and unique. The weather had been somewhat sultry, but not to any degree uncommon in the month of August. Was as fine as was ever known, and the great body of holiday-makers laid out yesterday for visits to Mulgrave Woods, Robin Hood's Bay, Rig Mill, Brunswick, Athos, and the various trips in the neighborhood of Whitby. The steamers, Emma and Scarborough, made trips up and down the coast, and there was an unusual amount of tripping both to and from Whitby. The day was unusually fine till the afternoon, when some of the gossips who frequent the East Cliff churchyard, and from that commanding eminence watched the wide sweep of sea visible to the north and east, called attention to a sudden show of mare's trails high in the sky to the northwest. The wind was then blowing from the southwest in the mild degree which in weather language is ranked number 2 light breeze. The Coast Guard on duty at once made report, and one old fisherman, who for more than half a century has kept watch on weather signs from the East Cliff, foretold in an emphatic manner the coming of a sudden storm. The approach of sunset was very beautiful, so granted in its masses of splendidly colored clouds that there was quite an assemblage on the walk along the cliff in the old churchyard to enjoy the beauty. Before the sun dipped below the black mass of Kettleness, standing boldly athwart the western sky, its downward wave was marked by myriad clouds of every sunset color: flame, purple, pink, green, violet, and all the tints of gold, with here and there masses, not large, but of seemingly absolute blackness, in all sorts of shapes, as well as outlined as colossal silhouettes. The experience was not lost on the painters, and doubtless some of the sketches of the prelude to the great storm will grace the R.A. and R.I. walls in May next. More than one captain made up his mind then and there that his cobble, or his mule, as they termed different classes of boats, would remain in the harbor till the storm had passed. The wind fell away entirely during the evening, and at midnight there was a dead calm, a sultry heat, and that prevailing intensity which, on the approach of thunder, affects persons of a sensitive nature. There were but few lights in sight at sea, for even the coasting steamers, which usually hug at the shore so closely, kept well to seaward, and but a few fishing boats were in sight. The only sail noticeable was a foreign schooner with all the sails set, which was seemingly going westwards. The foolhardiness of ignorance of her officers was a prolific theme for comment, whilst she remained in sight, and efforts were made to signal her to reduce sail in face of her danger. Before the night shut down, she was seen with sails idly flapping as she gently rolled on the undulating swell of the sea. Shortly before 10 o'clock, the stillness of the air grew quite oppressive, and the silence was so marked that the bleating of a sheep inland, or the barking of a dog in the town, was distinctly heard. The band on the pier, with its lively French air, was like a discord in the great harmony of nature's silence. A little after midnight came a strange sound from over the sea, and high overhead. The air began to carry a strange, faint, hollow booming. Then, without warning, the tempest broke, with a rapidity which, at the time, seemed incredible, and even afterwards, it's impossible to realize the whole aspect of the nature at once becoming convulsed. The waves rose in growing fury, each overtopping its fellow, till in a very few minutes the lately glassy sea was like a roaring and devouring monster. White-crested waves beat madly on the level sands and rushed up the shelving cliffs. Others broke over the piers, and with their spume swept the lanthorns of the lighthouses which rise from the end of either pier of Whitby Harbor. The wind roared like thunder, and blew with such force that it was with difficulty that even strong men kept their feet, or clung with grim clasp to the iron stanchions. It was found necessary to clear the entire piers from the mass of onlookers, or else the fatalities of the night would have been increased manifold. To add to the difficulties and dangers of the time, masses of sea fog came drifting inland, white-lit clouds which swept by in ghostly fashion, so dank and damp and cold that it needed but little effort of imagination to think that the spirits of those lost at sea were touching their living brethren with the clammy hands of death, and many a one shuddered as the wreaths of sea mist swept by. At times the mist cleared, and the sea for some distance could be seen in the glare of the lightning, which now came thick and fast, followed by such sudden peals of thunder that the whole sky overhead seemed trembling under the shock of the footsteps of the storm. Some of the scenes thus revealed were of an immeasurable grandeur, and of absorbing interest. The sea, running mountains high, threw skywards with each wave mighty masses of white foam, which the tempest seemed to snatch at and whirl away into space. Here and there a fishing boat, with a rag of sail, running madly for the shelter before the blast, now and again the white wings of a storm-tossed seabird. On the summit of the east cliff, the new searchlight was ready for experiment, but had not been tried yet. The officers in charge of it got it into working order, and in the pauses of the intrusive mist swept with it the surface of the sea. Once or twice its service was most effective, as when a fishing boat, with gunwale under water, rushed into the harbor, able, by the guidance of that sheltering light, to avoid the danger of dashing against the piers. As each boat achieved the safety of the port, there was a shout of joy from the mass of people on shore, a shout which for a moment seemed to cleave the gale, and was then swept away in its rush. Before long, the searchlight discovered some distance away a schooner, with all sails set, apparently the same vessel which had been noticed earlier in the evening. The wind had by this time backed to the east, and there was a shudder amongst the watchers of the cliff as they realized the terrible danger in which she now was. Between her and the port lay the great flat reef on which so many good ships had from time to time suffered, and, with the wind blowing from its present quarter, it would be quite impossible that she should fetch the entrance of the harbor. It was now nearly the hour of high tide, but the waves were so great that in their troughs the shallows of the shore were almost visible, and the schooner, with all its sails set, was rushing with such speed that, in the words of one old salt, she must fetch up somewhere, if it was only in hell. Then came another rush of sea fog, greater than any before, a mass of dank mist, which seemed to close on all things like a great pall, and left available to men only the organ of hearing. For the roar of the tempest, and the crash of the thunder, and the booming of the mighty billows came through the damp oblivion even louder than before. The rays of the searchlight were kept fixed on the harbor mouth across the east, where the shock was expected, and the men waited breathless. The wind suddenly shifted to the northeast, and the remnant of the sea fog melted in the blast, and then, Marbili dictu, between the piers, leaping from wave to wave as it rushed at headlong speed, swept the strange schooner before the blast. With all sails set, it gained the safety of the harbor. The searchlight followed her, and a shudder ran through all who saw her, for lashed to the helm was a corpse, with drooping head, which swung horribly to and fro at each motion of the ship. No other form could be seen on deck at all. A great awe came on all as they realized that the ship, as if by a miracle, had found the harbor, unsteered save by the hand of a dead man. However, all took place more quickly than it takes to write these words. The schooner paused, not but rushing across the harbor, pitched herself on an accumulation of sand and gravel, washed by many tides and many storms, into the southeast corner of the pier jutting under the east cliff, known locally as Tate Hill Pier. There was, of course, a considerable concussion as the vessel drove up on the land heap. Every spar, rope, and stay was strained, and some of the top hammer came crashing down. But strangest of all, the very instant the shore was touched, and the immense dog sprang up on deck from below, as if shot at by the concussion, and, running forward, jumped from the bow onto the sand, making straight for the steep cliff, where the churchyard hangs over the laneway, to the east pier, so steeply that some of the flat tombstones, thrustings, or throughstones, as they call them in the Whitby vernacular, actually project over where the sustaining cliff has fallen away. It disappeared in the darkness, which seemed intensified just beyond the focus of the searchlight. It so happened that there was no one at the moment on Tate Hill Pier, as all those whose houses are in close proximity were either in bed or were out on the heights above. Thus, the Coast Guard, on duty on the eastern side of the harbor, who had once ran down to the little pier, was the first to climb on board. The men working the searchlight, after scouring the entrance of the harbor without seeing anything, then turned the light on to the derelict and kept it there. The Coast Guard ran aft, and when he came beside the wheel, bent over to examine it, and recoiled at once as though under some sudden motion. This seemed to pique the general curiosity, and quite a number of people began to run. It is a good way round from the west cliff by the drawbridge to Tate Pier, but your correspondent is a fairly good runner and came well ahead of the crowd. When I arrived, however, I found already assembled on the pier a crowd whom the Coast Guard and police refused to allow to come on board. By the courtesy of the chief boatman, I was, as your correspondent, permitted to climb on deck, and was one of a small group who saw the dead seaman who was actually lashed to the wheel. It was no wonder that the Coast Guard was surprised, or even awed, for not often can such a sight have been seen. The man was simply fastened by his hands, tied one over the other, to a spoke of the wheel. Between the inner hand and the wood was a crucifix, the set of beads on which it was fastened being around both wrists and the wheel, and all kept fast by the binding cords. The poor fellow may have been seated at one time. The buffeting of the sails had worked through the rudder of the wheel and dragged him to and fro, so that the cords with which he was tied had cut the flesh to the bone. Accurate note was made of the state of things, and a doctor, Surgeon J. M. Caffin, of 33 East Elliott Place, who came immediately after me, declared, after making an examination, that the man must have been dead for quite 2 days. In his pocket was a bottle, carefully corked, empty save for a little roll of paper, which proved to be the addendum to the log. The Coast Guard said the man must have tied up his own hands, fastening the knots with his teeth. The fact that the Coast Guard was the first on board may save some complications later on in the courts, for Coast Guards cannot claim the salvage, which is the right of the first civilian entering on a derelict. Already, however, the legal tongues are wagging, and one young law student is loudly asserting that the rights of the owner are already completely sacrificed, his property being held in contravention of the statutes of the mortmain, since the tiller, as embellishment, if not proof, of the delegated possession, is held in a dead hand. It is needless to say that the dead steersman had been reverently removed from the place where he held his honorable watch, and ward till death, a steadfastness as noble as that of the young Caspian, and placed in the mortuary to await inquest. Already, the sudden storm is passing, and its fierceness is abating. Crowds are scattering homeward, and the sky is beginning to redden over the Yorkshire wolds. I shall send in time for your next issue further details of the derelict ship which found her way so miraculously into the harbor in the storm. Whitby. 9 August. The sequel to the strange arrival of the derelict in the storm last night is almost more startling than the thing itself. It turns out that the schooner is a Russian from Varna, and is called the Demeter. She is almost entirely in ballast of silver sand, with only a small amount of cargo, a number of great wooden boxes filled with mold. This cargo was consigned to a would-be solicitor, Mr. S. F. Billington of 7, the Crescent, who this morning went aboard and formally took possession of the goods consigned to him. The Russian consul, too, acting for the charter party, took formal possession of the ship and paid Old Harbor dues, etc. Nothing is talked about here today except the strange coincidence. The officials of the Board of Trade have been most exacting in seeing that every compliance has been made with existing regulations, as the matter is to be a 9-day wonder, evidently determined that there shall be no cause of after complaint. A good deal of interest was abroad concerning the dog which landed when the ship struck, and more than a few of the members of the SPCA, which is very strong and would be, have tried to befriend the animal, to the general disappointment. However, it was not to be found. It seems to have disappeared entirely from the town. It may be that it was frightened and made its way on to the moors, where it is still hiding in terror. There are some who look with dread on such a possibility, lest later on it should in itself become a danger, for it is evidently a fierce brute. Early this morning, a large dog, a half-bred mastiff, belonging to a coal merchant close to the Tate Hill Pier, was found dead in the roadway opposite to its master's yard. It had been fighting a manifestly savage opponent, for its throat was torn away, and its belly was slit open, as if with a savage claw. Later, by the kindness of the Board of Trade Inspector, I have been permitted to look over the logbook of the boat, which was in order up to within 3 days ago, but contained nothing of special interest except as to facts of missing men. The greatest interest, however, is with regard to the paper found in the bottle, which was today produced at the inquest, and a more strange narrative than the two between them unfolded. As there is no motive for concealment, I am permitted to use them, and accordingly send you a rescript simply omitting the technical details of the seamanship and supercargo. It almost seems as though the captain had been seized with some kind of mania before he had got well into the blue water, and that this had developed persistently throughout the voyage. Of course, my statement must be taken cum grano, since I am writing from the dictation of a clerk of the Russian consul, who kindly translated for me, time being short. Here is the log of the ship, Barnard and Whidbey, written 18 July. Things so strange happening that I shall keep accurate note henceforth till we land. On July 6th, we finished taking in cargo, silver sand and boxes of earth. At noon, set sail. East wind, fresh. Crew 5 hands, 2 mates, cook, and myself, being the captain. On 11 July, at dawn, entered Bosphorus boarded by Turkish customs officers. Backsheesh. All correct. Underway at 4 p.m. On 12 July, through Dardanelles, more customs officials and flagboat guarding squadron. Backsheesh again. Work of officers thorough, quick but quick. Want us off soon. At dark, passed into our archipelago. Say that word today. On 13 July, past Cape Matapan, crew dissatisfied about something. Seemed scared, but would not speak out. On 14 July, was somewhat anxious about crew. Men, old steady fellows, who sailed with me before. Mate could not make out what was wrong. They only told him and crossed themselves. Mate lost temper with one of them that day and struck him. Expected fierce quarrel, but all was quiet. On seeing it reported in the morning that one of the crew, Petrovsky, was missing. Could not account for it. Took larboard watch 8 bells last night. Was relieved by Day-Brahm, but did not go to Buck. Men more downcast than ever. All said they expected something of the kind, but would not say more than there was something aboard. Some trouble ahead. On 17 July, yesterday, one of the men, old Garin, came to my cabin and in an awestruck way confided to me that he thought there was a strange man aboard the ship. He said that in his watch he had been sheltering behind the deck house, as there was a rainstorm, when he saw a tall, thin man, who was not like any of the crew, come up the companionway and go along the deck forward and disappear. He followed cautiously, but when he got to bows, found no one, and the hatchways were all closed. He was in a panic of superstitious fear, and I am afraid the panic may spread. To allay it, I shall today search the entire ship carefully from stem to stern. Later in the day, I got together the whole crew and told them, as they evidently thought there was someone in the ship, we would search from stem to stern. First mate, angry, said it was folly, and to yield such foolish ideas would demoralize the men. Said he would engage to keep them out of trouble with a handspike. I let him take the helm, while the rest began a thorough search, all keeping abreast with lanterns. We left no corner unsearched. As there were only the big wooden boxes, there were no odd corners where a man could hide. Men much relieved when the search was over, and went back to work. First mate scowled, but said nothing. 22 July. Rough weather, last 3 days. And all hands busy with sails, no time to be frightened. Men seemed to have forgotten their dread. Mate cheered again, and all on good terms. Praised men for work in bad weather, past Gibraltar and out through straits. All is well. 24 July. There seems some doom over this ship, already a hand short, and entering on the Bay of Biscay with wild weather ahead, and yet last night another man lost, disappeared. Like the first, he came off his watch and was never seen again. Men, all in a panic of fear, sit around robin, asking to have double watch, as they fear to be alone. Mate's angry. Fear there will be some trouble. So either he or the men will do some violence. 28 July. 4 days in hell. Knocking about in a sort of maelstrom, and the wind a tempest. No sleep for anyone. Men all worn out. Hardly know how to set a watch, since no one fit to go on. Second mate volunteered to steer and watch, and let men snatch a few hours' sleep. Wind abating, sea still terrific, but feel the less as ship is steadier. 29 July. Another tragedy. Had single watch tonight, as crew too tired to double. When morning watch came on deck, could find no one except steersman. Raised outcry, and all came back on deck. Thorough search, but no one found. Are now without second mate and crew in a panic. Mate and aggregate armed henceforth and wait for any sign of cause. 30 July. Last night. Rejoiced we are nearing England. Weather all sails set. Retired, worn out. Slept soundly. Awakened by mate telling me that both men of watch and steersman missing. Only self and mate and 2 hands left to work the ship. 1 August. 2 days of fog, and not a sail sighted. Had hoped, when in the English Channel, to be able to signal for help or get in somewhere. Not having power to work sails. Have to run before wind. Dare not lower, as could not raise them again. We seem to be drifting to some terrible doom. Mate now more demoralized than either of the men. His strongest nature seems to have worked inwardly against himself. Men are beyond fear. Working stolidly and patiently with minds made up to the worst. They are Russian. 2 August midnight. Woke up from a few minutes' sleep by hearing a cry, seemingly outside my port. Could see nothing in fog. Rushed on deck and ran against mate. Tells me he heard cry and ran, but no sign of man on watch. 1 more gone. Lord help us. Mate says we must be past Straits of Dover. As in a moment the fog lifted, he saw North Foreland, just as he heard the man cry out. If so, we are now off in the North Sea, and only God can guide us in the fog, which seems to, move with us, and God seems to have deserted us. 3rd August, at midnight. I went to relieve the man at the wheel, and when I got to it, found no one there. The wind was steady, and as we ran before it, there was no yawing. I dared not leave it, so shouted for the mate. After a few seconds, he rushed up on deck in his flannels. He looked wide-eyed and haggard, and I had greatly feared his reason had given way. He came close to me and whispered hoarsely, with his mouth to my ear, as though fearing the very air might hear. It is here. I know it now. On the watch last night I saw it, like a man, tall and thin, and ghastly pale. It was in the bows, and looking out, I crept behind it and gave it my knife. But the knife went through it, empty as the air. And as he spoke, he took his knife and drove it savagely into space. Then he went on. But it is here, and I'll find it. It is in the hold, perhaps in one of those boxes. I'll unscrew them one by one and see. You work the helm. And, with a warning look and his finger on his lip, he went below. There was springing up a choppy wind, and I could not leave the helm. I saw him come on deck, again with a tool chest and a lantern, and go down the forward hatchway. He is mad, stark raving mad, and it's no use my trying to stop him. He can't hurt those big boxes. They are invoiced as clay, and to pull them about is as harmless a thing as he can do. So here I stay, and mind the helm, and write these notes. I can only trust in God and wait till the fog clears. Then, if I can't steer in any harbor, the wind, I shall cut down the sails and lie by and signal for help. It is nearly all over now, just as I was beginning to hope that the mate would come out calmer, from as something in the hold, and work is good for him. There came up the hatchway a sudden, startled scream, which made my blood run cold, and up on the deck he came, as if shot from a gun, a raging madman, with his eyes rolling and his face convulsed with fear. Save me, he cried, and then looked round on the blanket of fog. His horror turned to despair, and in a steady voice he said, "You had better come too, Captain, before it's too late. He is here. I know the secret now. The sea will save me from him, and it is all that is left." Before I could say a word or move forward to seize him, he sprang on the bulwark and deliberately threw himself into the sea. I suppose I know the secret too now. It was this madman who had got rid of the men one by one, and now he has followed them himself. God help me. How am I to account for all these horrors when I get to port? When I get to port, will that ever be? 4 August. Still fog, which the sunrise cannot pierce. I know there is sunrise because I am a sailor. Why else I know not. I dare not go down. I dare not go below. I dare not leave the helm. So here all night I stayed, and in the dimness of the night I saw it, him. God forgive me, but the mate was right to jump overboard. It was better to die like a man, to die like a sailor in blue water. No man can object. But I am captain, and I must not leave my ship. But I shall baffle this fiend or monster, for I shall tie my hands to the wheel when my strength begins to fail. And along with them I shall tie that which it dare not touch. And then, come good wind or foul, I shall save my soul and my honor as a captain. I am growing weaker, and the night is coming on. If he can look me in the face again, I may not have time to act. If we are wrecked, mayhap the spot will be found, and those who find it may understand. If not, well, then all men shall know that I have been true to my trust. God and the Blessed Virgin and the saints help a poor ignorant soul trying to do his duty. Of course, the verdict was an open one. There was no evidence to adduce, and whether or not the man himself committed the murders, there is now none to say. The folk here hold almost universally that the captain is simply a hero, and he is to be given a public funeral. Already it is arranged that his body is to be taken with a train of boats up the Esk for a piece, and then brought back to Tate Hill Pier and up the Abbey steps, for he is to be buried in the churchyard on the cliff. The owners of more than 100 boats have already given in their names as wishing to follow him to the grave. No trace has ever been found of the great dog, at which there is much mourning. For, with public opinion in its present state, he would, I believe, be adopted by the town. Tomorrow we'll see the funeral, and so will end this one more mystery of the sea. Now we return to Mina Murray's journal. 8 August. Lucy was very restless all night, and I, too, could not sleep. The storm was fearful as it boomed loudly among the chimney pots. It made me shudder. When a sharp puff came, it seemed to be like a distant gun. Strangely enough, Lucy did not wake, but she got up twice and dressed herself. Fortunately, each time, I awoke in time and managed to undress her without waking her, and got her back to bed. It's a very strange thing, this sleepwalking. For as soon as her will is thwarted in any physical way, her intention, if there be any, disappears, and she yields herself almost exactly to the routine of her life. Early in the morning, we both got up and went down to the harbor to see if anything had happened in the night. There were very few people about, and though the sun was bright, and the air clear and fresh, the big grim-looking waves that seemed to dark themselves because of the foam that topped them was like snow, forced themselves in through the narrow mouth of the harbor, like a bullying man going through the crowd. Somehow I felt glad that Jonathan was not on the sea last night, but on land. But oh, is he on land or sea? How? I'm getting fearfully anxious about him. If only I knew what to do, and could do anything. August. The funeral of the poor sea captain today was most touching. Every boat in the harbor seemed to be there, and a coffin was carried by captains all the way from Tate Hill Pier up to the churchyard. Lucy came with me, and we went early to our old seat, whilst the cortege of boats went up the river to the viaduct and came down again. We had a lovely view, and saw the procession nearly all the way. The poor fellow was laid to rest quite near our seat, so that we stood on it when the time came and saw everything. Poor Lucy seemed so upset. She was restless and uneasy all the time, and I cannot but think that her dreaming at night is telling on her. She is quite odd in one thing. She will not admit to me that there is any cause for restlessness, or if there be, she does not understand it herself. There is an additional cause in the poor old Mr. Swales was found dead this morning on our seat, his neck being broken. He had evidently, as the doctor said, fallen back in the seat in some sort of fright, for there was a look of fear and horror on his face that the men said made them shudder. Poor dear old man, perhaps he had seen death with his dying eyes. Lucy is so sweet and sensitive that she feels influences more acutely than other people do. Just now, she was quite upset by a little thing which I did not much heed, though I am myself very fond of animals. One of the men who came up here, often to look for the boats, was followed by his dog. The dog is always with him. They are both quiet persons, and I never saw the man angry, nor heard the dog bark. During the service, the dog would not come to its master, who was on the seat with us, but kept a few yards off, barking and howling. Its master spoke to it gently, and then harshly, and then angrily, but it would neither come nor cease to make a noise. It was in a sort of fury, with its eyes savage, and all its hairs bristling out like a cat's tail, when Puss was on the warpath. Finally, the man, too, got angry and kicked the dog, and then took it by the scruff of the neck and half dragged and half threw it on the tombstone on which the seat is fixed. The moment it touched the stone, the poor thing became and fell all into a tremble. It did not try to get away, but crouched down, quivering and cowering, and was in such a pitiful state of terror that I tried, though without effect, to comfort it. Lucy was full of pity too, but she did not attempt to touch the dog, but looked at it in a nice sort of way. I greatly fear that she is of too supersensitive a nature to go through the world without trouble. She will be dreaming of this tonight, I'm sure. The whole, uh, the whole thing, the ship steered in a port by a dead man. His attitude, tied to the wheel with a crucifix and beads, the touching funeral, the dog, now furious and in terror, will all afford material for her dreams. I think it will be best for her to go to bed, tired out physically. I shall a long walk by the cliffs to Robin Hood's Bay and back. She ought to not have much inclination for sleepwalking, at least after the walk. We did it. So that's it till next Sunday. I want to thank you guys for coming and listening. I know it's Sunday. Everybody's got things that they want to. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Tomorrow we'll be back at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, and we're going to have a different kind of day. The story I'm telling tomorrow, than my guest, Diane Marger-Moore, she is a prosecutor, a former prosecutor, and she got handed a case about a missing 4-year-old boy. The problem is that this is like an interesting case in that she was able to get a conviction even though there was no body. But it's going to remind you kind of like of the Casey Anthony case, the Casey Anthony case. Everybody knows about that because it's a similar type of deal. So that should be something interesting for you guys to listen to tomorrow. She will be on 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Okay, thank you all. And like I said, we're at that fundraising point where we're 160 short to pay everything down by the 30th. If you guys could find it in your heart to help me out, that'd be great. If not, that's fine too. I'm just trying to keep the show on the air and trying to get creative about ways to keep the show on the air. Anyway, thank you very much. If you like the show, share it with 10 people. If you hate the show, share it with 5 people. It's hot. Share it with 5. If you hate the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're just trying to get the word out about this little old show. All right? Now, I'll see you guys tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, and we'll be talking about missing at random sins. So, have a great evening, everybody, and enjoy.